Hey YouTube, Mishkaval here. Today we're going to talk about Odin and his two brothers. I have talked a bit about Odin and his two brothers on TikTok. TikTok is Mishkavalhalla. I cover a lot of topics on TikTok and I'm there more often, so feel free to check it out. Odin and his two brothers are an interesting subject and it isn't often talked about. And you can compare this subject of Odin and his two brothers to the many trinities you can see in ancient European / Indo-European religions. Especially in traditions local to Europe, you will see these trinities a lot, especially with the Fates, the three spinners of fate mentioned in many lores, especially in the Norse and Germanic lore and the Greco-Roman lore. They talk about three spinners that weave fate, and I have talked about them in the past. Odin, the name Odin translates to be consumed with ecstasy, roughly speaking. But Lothur, being part of his name, means ecstasy or inspiration, like divine inspiration. And I did talk about the mead of inspiration and how Odin drank it and accidentally shared it with man, and the drops fell on Midgard. Another example of the Trinity would be Zeus and his two brothers, Poseidon and Hades. At the temple in Uppsala, it was reported that there were three gods, three large statues, one representing Odin, one representing Thor, and one perhaps Freya. Back to Odin and his two brothers, Hoenir and Lothur. Hoenir was described as having a beautiful body but a dull mind, meaning that he served more as a spirit giver, a giver of spirit, a giver of, I guess you could say, spiritual astral form. The god Hoenir, when it comes to the creation story in the Eddas, they talk about Odin and his two brothers going to the beach and going to the wood that they find, whether it's figuratively speaking wood or from nature. You have the ash tree and then you have the elm, and it's believed that Odin and his two brothers got together so that they could create Ask and Emla, which is ash and elm, the first man and woman. However, when reading these stories, especially from an ancient point of view, it is best to not read it at face value. It's not like a storybook. It's something that perhaps is more metaphorical when it comes to creation myths and such. But when you read between the lines, there is some interesting archaic knowledge that is hidden. Odin, it was said to give humanity Ond, which is the breath of life, and in many ancient shamanic traditions, pagan ancient belief systems, it was believed that the breath was the source of the spirit, the source of life per se, literally and spiritually. The breath, Ond, was the power that was given by Odin, who is ecstasy, who is fury, who is of fury and of ecstasy, because he is a god of wisdom, knowledge, war, death, shamanism. He is a god of magic, a god of the runes, for he was the one who hung himself for 9 nights, wounded by his spear, and he had this great ordeal, sacrificing himself to his higher self. And through that mission, he saw the runes from the deep, and he took up the runes. and that was the end of his trial, to learn the power of the runes. And I do talk about that journey in previous videos. But when we are talking about Odin and his two brothers, they seem to often be very close together. Odin is often mentioned more, of course, but that is because he's seen as the Allfather, and his two brothers were known to sleep with Frigg while Odin was gone wandering. So that is a good example of what was going on in the Viking Age. How men would often go off, some women too, but a lot of people would leave their wives or spouses behind. It wasn't uncommon for people to be unfaithful per se. However, problems like these were common all over the world, of course, since humanity has a lot of faults and because no one's perfect. And on top of that, since often a man would be gone and would be leaving their wife behind with the kids, the wife, would be given 3 years, and if the husband didn't come back, then the wife could remarry. But at the same time, this is a woman that could own the land. She could, she was the owner of the house. However, later on, as the Viking Age went by, over time, more and more, the woman had to play more of a docile role and stay at home, while the husband was the only one to be off and to be working. Back to Odin and his three brothers. Lothur is Odin's third brother, and Lothur is often compared to gods like Freyr and Loki, and this is because Lothur is known to give humanity flesh and godly hue. So in a way, the flesh is, sort of something that is chaotic. It's something, that, a trickster god would give, is flesh, So, because Loki is a god of trial, he is the god that brings about Ragnarok, or at least he plays a major role in bringing Ragnarok. But of course, Ragnarok, is a total rebirth of all things. And when it comes to Ragnarok, it is sort of a thing that none of the gods can escape, because this is something that is associated with, the rebirth cycle of things, how all things must end, but at the end of Ragnarok, the world is reborn. Again, these are these ancient cycles that our pagan ancestors would follow. But Lothur being Freyr, could be, a possibility, because Freyr is very much like Freya. They are very much gods of sexuality, and they're known to be beautiful in appearance, and I guess you could associate that with godly hue. But if we are talking about Loki being Lothur, which kind of linguistically sounds similar, but when we were talking about Loki is also the blood brother to Odin. They made a blood oath together, so it could have to do with them, he and his two brothers being a trinity through a blood oath. It could be more information that we don't have about the past of Odin and his two brothers. It sort of draws more on the concept of Odin and his two brothers being of the same consciousness. And this also, I'm sure some of you are waiting for me to mention the Trinity in Christianity. The Trinity doesn't exist in all forms of Christianity. That aspect, in fact, had trickled down from European traditional concepts, or should I say Eurasian concepts. I'm sure many of you know the symbol often seen on Mjolnir, which is the triquerta, or the Trinity symbol. It is a knot that looks like this. And That trinity is often used by Celtic Christian groups, or just certain Christian groups that recognize the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which to them are one and the same. But then again, there are some sects that believe they're completely separate entities, like there's just the Father and the Son, or something like that. But if you go back, the Trinity is very common in ancient Europe. It was very common in the ancient pagan traditions to have a trickster god being associated with creation, especially shamanic traditions. You will have Odin, who is like Raven from a lot of Inuit traditions. He is this trickster god, he is a raven god, he is a wanderer, and he also stole a sacred brew that he accidentally dropped upon the land of the living. But obviously the stories are different in each tradition, but when it comes to this trickster raven god, he is often seen as a friend to Loki, a brother to Loki. They have this old bond because Odin is often the trickster, for all the things he does. He has a lot of nicknames, that are often associated with someone who takes things, trickery. Odin is often wandering about and stealing things, trying to gain knowledge. He stole the meat of inspiration and seduced the giantess, the daughter of Gunlod. It's also spoken of that Odin did a crime and was exiled from Asgard, and Ullr had to become the Allfather while Odin was in exile. Ullr is a fun example of an original Scandinavian Allfather type figure because he is associated with skiing and hunting and winter sports, as well as oaths and the bear cults. And the bear cults in Scandinavia are often associated with kingship. And of course, since Odin is connected to kingship, one of his animals is of course the bear, and that of course includes the wolf and the raven. Berlin is of course named after the bear. Anyway, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. If any of you have any trinities to mention in ancient pagan lore or in any other religions, please let me know and comment. I'm always learning just like everyone else. I'm definitely not an all-knower, and no one is, and I'm always learning new things every single day, and I'll never stop, just like everyone else. So please, if you all have information that I don't know, please share with me in the comments. Anyway, I want to wish you all a happy holidays and happy Yule for those of you who are heathen, and stay safe, everybody. And please like and subscribe. I also want to make a shout out to the artist Fuimadane. He creates some amazing stuff. I have had some conversations with him, and he is a very genuine, down-to-earth guy. Please check out his music. Here's a link to it. Stay safe, everybody, and hail.